You know, Hanukkah is one of my favorite holidays to talk about, and I tell you, it just gets more interesting every year. I dive a little bit deeper into the richness of the story and how Hanukkah came about. And you know, the story of Hanukkah, the way that it came about, it is really all about social justice. It's a story about social justice, and it's also profoundly mystical. Two of my favorite things. Social justice and mysticism. I'm in my happy place. So, a very, very long time ago, thousands of years ago, the religious traditions and the Jewish way of life were being seriously threatened by the ancient Greeks. And by the 2nd century BCE, Jerusalem was occupied by the Syrians, who way back then were devotees of the culture of ancient Greece. And they were really threatened by the Jewish way of life, which was the belief that it was God who created humanity, and God, or Yahweh, was holy. The Jewish people's loyalty was only to the word of God rather than to the human king back then, who wanted all the attention. And this caused major, major problems. So as such, the king of the day decided to make Jewish religious practices, such as observing Sabbath, forbidden. He gave orders that all the copies of the law of Moses be searched out and burned. And in an act of absolute spite, he gave orders to right there in what was called the Holy of the Holies, which is the sacred place in the Temple of Jerusalem. It was a sacred, sacred square that the highest priest could only go to once per year, the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. It was also the place where the Ark of the Covenant was enshrined, and the Ark of the Covenant, which was this sacred, sacred symbol of Israel's special relationship with God. This spiteful human who happened to be a king decided that it would be in that very, very location in the Temple of Israel that he would put up an altar to honor the Greek god Zeus. And it was in that very sacred space that he ordered pigs to be slaughtered. Pigs who were forbidden by the Jews in any place. And this was just too much for the Jewish people, can you imagine, in their sacred place. And so as a result, a battle ensued, and this small but mighty band of dedicated, the word Hanukkah means dedicated, this small band of dedicated priest-like warriors called the Maccabees went into battle, a battle that lasted for 3 years. So much blood was shed and lives lost, but they stood for what they believed in, and against all odds, the Maccabees won. They won against this powerful, huge Greek army who was very well equipped. You know, a very important part of this story that I think often is overlooked is that really you can trace back this battle for social justice the Maccabees embarked upon. Really what they did was they saved monotheism. Really? One could argue monotheism is the idea that there is one God. The Greeks had many gods. There's one God in the Jewish tradition, just as there is one God later in the Christian tradition, which came out of the Jewish tradition, and then in Islam. All thanks to the Maccabees, who stood for multiculturalism, who took a stand for social justice, and making certain that everyone had a right to practice and love their God in their way and follow their cultures and their traditions in their way. It was essentially about protecting everyone's faith and culture. And so after the astounding victory of the Maccabees, this extraordinary victory, they took back Jerusalem and they took back their temple. They took back that sacred place. And after cleaning it, because it was nearly destroyed, they realized that they only had enough oil to light a lamp for one night. Only for one night. After all that, after 3 years, can you even imagine? Here they are. Here they are. exhausted from battle, finally back in their temple, in their holy place, the place which represented the promise of the Jewish people, the place which represented the relationship that human beings have with the divine. When they discover they only have oil enough to last one night. Why is that important? Because in the ancient world, oil represented the presence and the power of God or spirit or divine, whatever word you want to use. Oil is mentioned nearly 200 times in the Hebrew and Christian Bibles. Oil was used to anoint and to heal. Jesus of Nazareth was called the Anointed One, right? And oil was required to keep the lamp continuously burning inside the temple. And this represented spirit or God's continuous relationship with the Jewish people. So it was more than just oil in a lamp. It represented the relationship, the continuing and ongoing and everlasting relationship between God and the people. And back then, it took a long time to go get oil, more than a week to go traverse on horseback or donkey back or whatever, and to come back and bring the oil. I think about this moment in the story. They've come so far. They've beaten the odds. They've accomplished so much. And then, can you imagine? No oil. Not enough. Again, they were looking metaphorically, because here in New Thought we understand that the Bible is a story of metaphor. Metaphorically, it represents that, again, they were looking at more darkness, at more challenge. What do you mean there is no more oil? What do you mean there is another variant called Omicron? What do you mean that a woman's autonomy is up for discussion around her own body? It's being discussed in the Supreme Court nearly 50 years after Roe versus Wade. What do you mean? What do you mean there was another shooting where kids died in Michigan? What do you mean there is no oil? Hi, God. That's it. For those of you online, God just called and said, Shannon, it's going to be okay. Oh, this carpet. And I'm not going to trip on this carpet either. All right. So, the story from thousands of years ago is so relatable to today, isn't it? Isn't it? Thousands of years later, my friends, we can all relate. What do you mean there is no more oil? It can be hard to have faith and to remain hopeful when it feels like we keep getting knocked down. The 11th century Rabbi Rashi wrote, "The one who acts out of love cannot be compared to the one who acts out of fear." The one who acts out of love cannot be compared to the one who acts out of fear. So, here is something to consider. When you look at the Maccabee story, there's a piece to consider here. So yes, absolutely, the ancient Greeks produced one of the most remarkable civilizations of the time. They gave us Plato and Aristotle and Socrates, Sophocles. They produced art and architecture like no other. They gave us so much. Yet, in the 2nd century before the Common Era, they were defeated by a small group of Maccabees, people dedicated, there's that word again, dedicated, who dedicated themselves to something greater than themselves. And from then on, Greece as a world power went into decline, while the comparatively smaller group, the Jewish people, survived. Why? What is the difference? Here's a thought. Now again, the Greeks did many, 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 many good things. But interestingly, they did not believe in a loving God. Rather, they had many different gods that they worked very hard to appease. They had many different gods that they had to feed and trick and quiet and essentially conquer. Sounds an awful lot like Western society, doesn't it? All of the different gods, small g, that we feed, that we manipulate, that we try to conquer and get and trick and appease. So staying with us, the Greeks also gave us tragedy. Think of the Greek tragedies in classical theater. On the other hand, something very important to note, ancient Israel gave the world the idea of hope. Of hope. We're celebrating hope this week in Advent. Catholics all over the world, people who celebrate Advent. It's this idea of hope. The Jewish people gave us the idea of a loving God, a relationship with God, and through that love and hope, the ability to discover meaning in our lives. So through the metaphysical lens, this is a metaphysical teaching here in New Thought Center for Spiritual Living. We understand that what we focus on increases. And if we are focusing the majority of our energy on tragedy and challenge and manipulating and tricking and conquering something or someone, it doesn't matter how powerful we think we are, we will never win. Why? Because, as the Jewish people taught us, love always wins. Love always and ultimately wins. If we dedicate ourselves to taking a stand for justice, to having faith in the power of love and grounded hope and triumph of the light over and overcoming the shadowed parts of this world, surely we will, like the ancient Maccabees, rise above whatever challenges appear, and we will transform them. But this is our work, to stay in the energy of light, to stay in the energy of love. Remember, the metaphysical meaning of light is divine intelligence, to keep our wits about us, to keep our heart and our mind above, while still doing the very important work. Like the Maccabees, we must commit to doing this work. And we do that here through classes and workshops, through conversations and spiritual growth circles. Rev Masando and I and Sarah, we have lots planned for the winter and spring, for you all, for us to grow, to do this work individually and collectively. Like the Maccabees, we must stay the course and not give up when the oil is low. To stay in the energy and the action of grounded hope. I'm reading Brené Brown's newest book, Atlas of the Heart. I pre-ordered it. If you don't have it, I highly suggest it. And in it, she writes, "We need hope like we need air." Right? We need hope like we need air, which brings us back to Hanukkah. So I've shared the social justice piece of the story, and now I want to share the mystical aspect. The mystical part is that even in their exhaustion and exasperation that there was only technically enough oil to last for one night, the mystical piece of the story is that the oil lasted for 8 nights, just the length it took for the person to come back on horseback or whatever, bringing the oil back to the temple. It lasted just that long which is important in this story. You know, it's all very woo-woo and cool. Darcy, we love a good amount of woo-woo here. You know, don't we? Don't we? We all have these really cool stories. We call them woo-woo. We all have these really cool stories, you know, of those moments in our lives, those mystical, miraculous moments in our lives where we turned one way and met that person who introduced us to that person, and then we met that person that led us to that or that or that, you know, or that obstacle that was in front of us. Someone came into our lives and supported us in such a way that had us shift our thinking or just do something different that brought us out of that or through that. We've all received gifts from people at just the right time, right? It could be a song from a musician we don't even know that miraculously shifts us in any given moment. These are our lived miracles. These are the lived miracles in our lives. And if you break it down, more often than not, those miracles, if you will, happen through other people on our behalf. God can only do for us what God can do through us. And that is not only true for us individually, but that is true for how we are connected to one another. We teach that there is only one here. We are all connected. We are each always performing miracles for each other all the time. All the time. And this season of light right now symbolizes this powerful, powerful idea that we can, and I believe we are meant to be, a light for someone who may need it. This is a huge part of our incarnation here. I know, baby. Yes. Amen, little one. It is. So, I'm going to get away from that rug. I'm going to talk to you down here. So, there was a rabbi who was teaching in an 8th grade classroom. And she was teaching these very eager students. And one of them raised their hand and said, "Rabbi," having a very 8th grade existential crisis, we've all been there. "Rabbi, I know that I'm supposed to do something important in my life, but I don't know what it is. What is my purpose? How do I know what my purpose is?" And the rabbi said, "Okay, all right. You going to pull that carpet for me?" Yes. All right. Thank you both. Oh, your loves. We're good. I'll just dodge it. Thanks. It's just us. It's fine. Thank you. See, that's family. That's spiritual family right there, what Rev Barb was talking about last week. Thank you. Thank you. God bless you. All right. So the student raises their hand and says, I know that I'm supposed to do something important with my life. I just don't know what that is. What is my purpose? What is my purpose? And the rabbi looked at the class and said, "Okay, class, what is the most important job in the world?" And the students from all corners of the classroom started raising their hands and shouting out, "The President of the United States, the Prime Minister of Israel, a parent, a teacher, a doctor, a firefighter." One kid who was wanting to get a good grade, a rabbi is the most important job. And then the student said, "Well, Rabbi, that all sounds great, but I still don't know. What is it that I am supposed to do? What am I supposed to do with my life?" And the rabbi said, "Let me tell you something. A long, long, long time ago, before there were iPads and iPhones and Disney Plus and Netflix, before all of that, before there was even electricity," she said, "in every town and every village, on every corner, there was a lamp. And when the light went down at sundown, it had to be lit. Otherwise, the entire town and the village would be in complete darkness. And there was a lamp lighter in the village. There was one person whose sole job it was. They would carry these really long poles with a light at the end of it. And their sole job was to light the lamp on every corner where it needed to be lit so that the people would be in the light, not in the darkness." And so, of course, this got the kids thinking, and one of them raised their hand and they said, "Well, well, what if there's a lamp in the middle of the desolate wilderness, in the middle of nowhere? And the rabbi said, well, they would have to absolutely go there. This lamplighter would have to go out to the wilderness, to the desolate place, and light that lamp. And then another student raised their hand and said, well, hang on. What if there was some way, 8th graders, what if there was some way that there was a pole in the middle of the ocean sticking straight up? Then what? And the rabbi said, well, they would have to put on a bathing suit and swim out to the middle of the ocean and somehow get up there and light the lamp. And all the kids were just like, wow. But the original student who asked the question raised their hand again and said, well, this is all wonderful, but I still don't know what I'm supposed to do. To which the rabbi replied, do whatever you are going to do. Have whatever job you are going to have. But your purpose in life, no matter where you go, is always to light a light into the dark places. That is our purpose in this life, is to be a light for those who need it. To go out into the middle of the darkened ocean of someone's heart and being and bring them to shore. Remind them who they are, whose they are, and the light within them that they have just forgotten. This is our purpose. And this brings me to this beautiful menorah. And for those of you who are not Jewish, this is actually called a Hanukkah. This is the type of menorah it means it has 4 candles on either side. And the candle in the middle is the tallest one. That is called the Shamash. The Shamash is the candle that is used to light all the other candles in the Jewish tradition. And this will happen tonight all over the world. Jewish people will take their Shamash and they will light all of the candles. And what I find so exquisitely beautiful about this is that the Shamash sort of has the highest place of prominence on the Hanukkah, right? The menorah. It has the highest place, and yet the word Shamash means servant. Its entire purpose is to light the other candles, to be in service, to shine light for others. This is such a beautiful reminder that we get to be the Shamash. That is truly what we are here to be, the lamplighter, the Shamash. The Shamash is known as the helper candle. The helper candle. In her book, Wholehearted Faith, published posthumously, Rachel Held Evans wrote, ancient Hebrew thought viewed the heart as an engine of action. It was seen as the muscle that moves us. The thoughts of the heart weren't these discrete, contained spiritual thought bubbles, but precursors of action. The heart is the precursor of action. So I am going to invite us this week into heartfelt precursor of action, inspired by this beautiful Jewish tradition. I'm going to invite us into a spiritual practice this week of lighting at least one candle, if you're willing, lighting at least one candle per day for someone else. Are you willing to do that this week? Each day, as a spiritual practice, light a candle. You can light more if you choose, but at least one to intentionally light a candle for someone else. This is an ancient ritual, and it's echoed throughout spirituality and the world's religions across the ages. And we teach here in New Thought that we are all connected on the seen and the unseen sides of life, and that science and spirituality truly do walk hand in hand now, finally. Science can prove that prayer or sending positive energy, if that's more comfortable for you, works. Even on the microscopic level, it is felt. And so this week, as a heartfelt precursor of action, you might light a candle for someone you know who may be in the middle of what feels like a dark ocean for them. Maybe you light a candle for someone who is sick or who is afraid or who is struggling. Or maybe you light a candle for the honoring of a loved one who has passed to the other side of life. Maybe you light a candle for our country right now. Maybe you choose to light a candle for the women of our country right now, or the families of the high school students who were killed. Maybe you choose to light a candle for all of those experiencing racism or homophobia. Maybe you choose to light a candle for those that are oppressed and for the oppressors. That is how we are going to create peace in this lifetime. To light a candle and then to move our feet, to do what is ours to do. There are so many opportunities here in this community. So let us this week look at the places on our block, in our families, in our communities, where we can choose to be the Shamash for someone else. Let us take the ancient story of the Maccabees and dedicate ourselves to taking a stand for what is right and what is good and what is always, always possible in love. Let us help light the way to greater peace and equity and love in our world.